I'm Deanna Cosaraju. I'm the founder of Global Tech Women. Welcome to Voices 2014. We are here at an exciting stage. This is Stacey's second session regarding her book, Inner Success, Inner Critics, Claiming Success While Taming the Inner Critic. Yesterday, we went over how to identify and diffuse the inner critic. And today, we're going to talk about how to build your inner success story and achieve resilience. So for those of you who weren't here yesterday, Stacey's going to give you the Reader's Digest version for those of you who know what Reader's Digest is, and tell you about and tell you about some of the top things that you need to know to move into this session. But you can definitely see her session. It's been recorded, so you can watch it later on. And I also would highly recommend that you visit her website. She has a lot of really good tools for you to identify inner critic and march through how you can go about diffusing them. She also has an amazing book that I love, 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 and we featured on our book club. So I hope that you will take advantage of all of those things that she has to offer. A few housekeeping items. You need to be logged into Spreecast in order to participate in the chat window that's over on the right-hand side. If you are going to stay here and hang out as a visitor, that's cool. You can use our Twitter feed at hashtag Voices 2014. I will monitor that Twitter feed, and if you post any questions up there, I will make sure that Stacey sees them and answers them for you. I talked about the chat window on the right. This is a great opportunity for you to network and to talk about what you're thinking. We love to see your thoughts, and I'm sure Stacey might have some interesting feedback for you based on what you say there. We also have a question box below both of us, that little blue box there. If you have any questions you want to ask Stacey directly, feel free to fill that out, and I will queue those up for her when she's ready for questions. The link to this session is actually going to be the same link for the recording. It will be available 30 minutes after the session closes. So the way you got in here is also the way you'll be able to see the recording. And you can share this, this session with friends and colleagues and people that you think might be interested in this really important topic, I believe, for technical women. And this session will be on somewhere between 30 days and 6 months. I'm working with Spreecast to figure out the exact time. When I send out the survey at the end of the conference, I will have an exact date for you so that you know when to take advantage of all of these great sessions that we've done over the last couple of days. And lastly, your feedback is welcome. Email me, Deanna@globaltechwoman.com. Join our Facebook group. We have a very animated, lively group over there who talks about news articles and feature stories about women in technology around the world. You will learn a lot from this group. I guarantee it. It's worth it. We compact all the news about women in tech and put it in one place. So it's the only place you'll ever have to go. So join our Facebook group. And then lastly, I'm going to be putting up a PowerPoint slide. When I put that up, you have complete control over that deck. You can drag it and drop it anywhere on the screen that fits your needs so that you can watch Stacey and chat and do the presentation at the same time. You have control over advancing those slides. So when she says slide 4, you need to actually use the arrow to advance your slides so that you can follow along with her. So I think I've done everything I need to do. Stacey, I'm going to hand this over to you, and then I'm going to put up your deck. So I'll be back at the end of the session.
Room.
You
I had my
practice?
microphone muted. Sorry
Oh,
about
okay.
that. See, it's never the technology. It's always user error.
Hey, you know, it happens. Okay, I'm going
Thanks,
away.
Rosita. Thank you. Okay, so I took my mute off and user error again. So thanks everybody for joining today. I am delighted to be back, and I hope folks can hear now. Great, Rosita, thanks for being here too. What I want to do is tell you a little bit about what we did yesterday, because Deanna and I did this in a two-part session. Um, First, I'll just do a brief intro. You can read my bio, but I work in leadership and team development at Connect Growth and Development. I've been doing this work for about 10 years, and I absolutely love it, facilitating, doing leadership and team programs. And I particularly work in women's leadership as well. And last year, I published a book called Inner Critic, Inner Success, Claiming Your Success While Taming the Critic. And I published it because I've been doing workshops on this and speaking about it for about 5 years. And I constantly had people saying, "You need more of this, you need more of this." Um, I resisted quite a bit because I don't really feel myself as a writer, but did it. And it seems to be useful for folks. And so I'm really glad we were able to break this into 2 sessions. So yesterday, I focused on the inner critic side of the book and a few tools and techniques for taming those critics. And as Deanna said, you have access to that and can rewatch that. I hope you do. I hope you find it useful. And this is the second part, sort of the continuing saga, where we talk about the related inner success parts of the book. Let me tell you why I think this is critically important. In my own experience and in coaching thousands of leaders, both men and women, I found that every time we would talk about what success is like, putting together some goals, and actually also focusing on an authentic definition of success, not necessarily what your company believes or what your boss believes or what society believes, but what you believe, as we would develop the definition of success and what their goals are, invariably the fears, the doubts, the inner critics would start to get vocalized. And so I see these things in a dynamic relationship with each other, our fears and our success. I believe they're related to each other. And so I wrote the book in that way, focusing on the inner critic, learning more about it, becoming more self aware, and then also learning more about your own definition of success, what really gets you excited, what's really important to you. And I believe that if you focus on those inner success aspects, the inner critic voice becomes a little bit less. You're able to catch it earlier. You're able to shift yourself from a critic focus to a success or a meaning focus. And so I look at coming at this from 2 different directions. So taming the critic, but also elevating and amplifying your own success. So that's what we'll focus on today is success. I also want to quickly introduce you to a client of mine, and I'll actually let her introduce herself. Um, that I've been working with Jane in a coaching relationship for quite some time, and then we had met during the Microsoft Women's Conference. And so Jane has done several of the practices we talked about, and Jane was also in our session yesterday on the critic side. But I thought it'd be useful for folks to hear both of us talk as we typically do in a coaching session, so that you can hear from a woman who is a global tech woman. So Jane, I'm going to hand it over to you and have you go ahead and introduce yourself if you don't mind.
Okay, can you guys hear me okay? You guys hear all right?
Yep, I can.
Okay, very good. I'm Jane Bove. I'm glad to be here and excited to have you guys see our coaching sessions that are incredibly changing in how I view not only myself and my career, but I can also take into my regular daily life. I work at Microsoft. I am a partner integration director, and I work with integrating our partners into the Microsoft system after we've signed contracts with them.
Great. Thanks, Jane. So I just want to give folks a little bit of recap of what Jane and I talked about yesterday. We went over the 6 classic critics, and I asked Jane to share a recent inner critic moment and the message that that inner critic um, had for her. And Jane, I totally want you to chime in if I get this incorrect. But Jane was talking about being in some meetings where something would happen and her inner voice in her head is saying that, oh, they think they shouldn't have picked me for this job, or they think that I am not smart enough for this job. And I know a lot of people can relate to that. I know that I've coached people before who relate to that. And in fact, I will let you know both men and women. I've heard them say that before as well. And so one of the things, techniques we worked on yesterday is called the truth series of questions, where we ask the critic voice if that statement is 100% true and what's more true and less true about that, given very specific data and facts. And that actually sort of really sets us up well today for some of the inner success techniques. So the slide that I'm going to focus on today in your guys' deck, I believe it's slide 11. And just to remember, you guys are in charge of advancing those slides on your own. But it's also, oh, it's actually slide 9 for you guys. I have hidden slides. So on slide 9 is where we start the inner success. So Bertita had asked if there were slide shares. There should be a slide deck that you can manage. We all get to manage our own slide decks today. And so what I thought I would do is take you through a couple of the inner success techniques and tools using Jane's. We're going to use the same inner critic voice, which Jane, did I get the message right that I don't deserve this job or I'm not smart enough for this job? Did I get it right, or is there some piece I missed?
That's correct. I don't deserve this job because there's other folks who I see around me who add so much value to the company, and oh my goodness, people will find out that I'm a fake.
Right. Oh, and you helped remind me that yesterday a nuance of that is that when I was asking Jane with the truth series question about what's more true and what's less true about her message, one of the things she shared was that, well, I'm an individual contributor, and I look at other people who are leaders who have teams, and they have more value, they have more impact on the work than I do as an IC. And so actually, I played a little trick on her, and I reframed the question. So, well, is that 100% true? Are there times when ICs have greater impact potentially than a team of people? So, and I would love to also ask folks, feel free to talk to each other in the chat room. If there's, I'd love to ask you to think about, is there a current inner critic message going on for you, or something that's recent for you that you're struggling with? And if you are, I encourage you to share about that in the chat room. I'm sort of monitoring it, and so don't feel alone or afraid or embarrassed, because one of the really important aspects about taming the critic and amplifying our success is to share with others. Because trust me, I have been in sessions before, and every single person in the room has had inner critic messages. Men, women, it's sort of an all-purpose type of thing. It's everybody. So I hope you'll share. I'm going to call out some of the folks. Please feel free, Charlotte and Rose, Tia and Robbie. So Jane, do you feel like you're ready to dive
Yes.
in? Okay, great. One of the things that I talk about in the book is something called the divine law. And this was a particular story with me that I'll actually share for, I have just a picture on slide 10 that you can look at that for me is important because it's of a tattoo. And to be totally honest, I actually have a tattoo that has a similar aspect to it. That's why I have this picture. Because frankly, I need reminded just as much as anybody else that sometimes the biggest flaws or challenges or negative voices in my head are there because they're related to some of the most important things. So I believe, and through studying, if you will, with my clients, that the inner critic often attacks us in the places that matter the most to us. Let that sink in. If you agree or if you have a feel for that, feel free to jump in on the chat. The inner critic often attacks us in the places that are the most important, the most vulnerable, the most deeply held. And I call that the divine flaw. I'll share my own story on that. So it's not just Jane that has to share everything. I will share as well. This terminology, divine flaw, came to me from a professor of mine, Pamela Johnson, at the Leadership Institute of Seattle. And I was taking a curriculum aspect of my graduate degree in behavioral science. I did all right. I was excited about it because it was on diversity, and that's a particular passion of mine. I worked it really hard. I spent tons of hours. I'm also a perfectionist, so I spent tons of hours just getting the PowerPoint perfect and the outline perfect. I made up little props for the session, and I delivered it, and it was fine. But in true perfectionist fashion, fine is just not good enough. Fine actually equals failure to me sometimes. And as I spoke with my professor about how disappointed I was, she said, "Okay, Stacey, why did you spend so much time on this?" Actually, what had happened was, I don't know if this happens to anybody else. Of course, it happens to anybody else. I'm not sure. But I overworked the presentation. So when you overwork something, you probably are familiar, it's not as much fun to engage with. She said, "Why did you overwork it? Why did you put that much into it?" And I said, as we talked, I really discovered that it was two things. One, this work that I do, facilitating, working with on human behavior, helping people with emotional intelligence, is so important to me. I have a deeply held core value around helping people and supporting them. And then the second thing that was critically important to me is the topic was about diversity. So I've been a woman working in technology my past career at Microsoft, at PeopleSoft, and often had been the only woman on my team. So I have a passion for diversity. And as Pam described to me, she said, "That's exactly it. That's your divinity. That's what's divine about you. You care so much about helping people. You care so much about diversity and inclusion and hearing voices that your inner critic, your perfectionist, will sometimes take over." And she was right. But I loved thinking about it as a divine flaw. So it's related. So if you sort of think about that infinity symbol, it's just energy that's moving back and forth. So what I'm going to ask Jane to do is work with me and help sort of uncover any potential divinity or blessing beneath her inner critic message. So Jane, I'm going to ask you in regards to the message you have to tell yourself that um, you're not the right person for this job, you don't have as much impact. Why is it so critical for you to have positive impact in this job? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Can you repeat that one more time? I'm sorry, I barely heard that.
You bet, Jane. Why is it so important for you to have positive impact in this job and to be considered smart and right for this job?
It's important because I'm the only breadwinner in my family. I have a husband and I have a son, and my son is 10 years old, and I feel this need to support our family. And the days when I feel that I'm not adding value, I have this fear of losing my job, or I have a fear of having my family not be taken care of if I'm to fail.
Yeah, right. So what I understand is that it's important for you to have big impact on your job, be good at your job, because you're the sole breadwinner. Your family, your son is reliant on you for those things. So you have to, you want to have an income, you want to support your family. Is that right?
Yes.
And I hope my microphone sound is a little better. I turned up my volume. What else, Jane? Why do you care about being able to add value in meetings and being able to add value as an IT?
There's also, and maybe a lot of the other women who are on the line have experienced this, but when you honestly feel passion for what you're doing, you naturally add value because you love what you're doing. It's easy to work hard because you have a sincere interest in seeing the outcome, and the value is always going to be there. Um, when I feel like I'm not, for some reason, the value isn't there, it makes me circle back to, why is the passion not there either? And is this not a good fit, or what's happening here? And it's part of the primary reason for the folks who are on the call why I reached out to Stacey in the first place.
Thanks for sharing that. That some of the passion you've been feeling around your job was sort of not as great as you've been feeling it before, right?
No, no.
And that you found when that passion is present for you, sorry, I have to move around because I get excited. When that passion is present for you, you've noticed that you do have greater impact. When the passion is there, the impact is there. Is that fair to
Yes,
say?
and you feel the value that you add, it's a very natural outcome because you're so vested and you're so interested and you're so passionate about what you're doing.
Hmm. And what can you get more specific about what's the passion area for you in your work?
The for me, the ability to build great products for our customers, the ability to have our partners be absolutely delighted with us, the ability for our initiatives to move very quickly and be agile and be okay to fail, but continue to try. And those are the aspects that I look at and go, those are the things that I really love my job. And I thought about this yesterday after our session on Friday. And I used to, and I don't know if some of you have felt this way, where you look back and you have a job or a position where it's really not a job, it's more a hobby because you love it so much, and those are the times in which, and the roles in which I feel like I've been the most successful. And so I'm now saying, why is it the hobby feeling of it not there anymore, and now it's feeling more like a job? So I've recognized that there's a change.
Yeah, yeah. And so there is a change, and and Jane has given me some permission to share this. Jane also has a great deal of passion around the people that she works with, the team she works with. I know she has a passion for women's leadership because I met her at the women's conference. She was a volunteer. She is looking forward to going to a Grace Hopper conference this year and coordinating that. Um, so what I hear you saying, Jane, is that part of what's important to you, specifically related to passion at work, is feeling that passion and feeling like you're not doing it for the money. You're doing it because you want your customers to be delighted in what you're doing. You want to be able to provide. If Jane is a problem solver, I can tell you that she loves to solve big, complex problems. And so when you feel that, it's just easier to be at work. It doesn't feel like a job. So I'm going to put the two next to each other now, Jane. I'm going to say, okay, there's an inner critic voice that says, gosh, I'm not having as much impact, or I'm not having enough impact. I wonder if I'm the right person for this job. And you wonder that, and that would be the flaw. That's sort of the inner critic or the doubt or the fear. And what I see is you wonder that because there's this divinity, this value, this strength in you that says, I know when I am passionate about my work that I make customers delighted about what we're doing. Is that fair to say?
Yes. And
Yeah. So when you're,
also
go
the
ahead, Jane.
people that you work with when you have a team of people, and all of you have probably had this scenario where you have this a group of people who come together and amazingly are able to make 1 + 1 3, and when you see when that happens that the collaboration actually creates this fantastic momentum, you want to do it again, and you want to have that feeling again, and you want to have the that rush of, man, we had a great team and we solved that fantastic problem.
Oh, we just lost Jane, I think. Okay, so Jane will come back on. I loved what she was saying too. So she was saying about when you get that rush with people on a team where you're solving a problem. Um, I'm this way too. I'm very similar to Jane. I love working in collaboration. And so for Jane, one of the tools on the success side of the book, and one of the ways to look at your inner critic differently, is to connect it to what you're passionate about. So you have this inner critic voice talking about something, sort of mean and nasty, the negative side of it, and it's connected to something really important to you. Maybe it's one of your deeply held core values. Maybe it's one of your strengths that, in the kind of strengths that when you employ it, time just disappears and you're flowing and you feel fantastic and energized. But it's connected to something most often, not every single time, but what uh, what in the divine flaw, what happens is you, instead of focusing on the negative, oh gosh, I'm not good enough to facilitate, I'm not good enough to hold this job, or I ruined the diversity presentation that I did. Instead of focusing on that negative, the divine flaw is one of the tools and techniques that I use all the time. And Jane, we're just getting you back, but I'm just describing the divine flaw. So that relationship is the ability to move from the negative, like, oh gosh, I'm not having enough impact, to saying, why do I care so much about having impact? I care because I do my best work when I'm passionate. I do my best work when I'm working in teams with folks. And in that technique, what I'm able to do, at least for me, is I'm able to sort of change the flow of the energy from negative. In my own example, I switched the flow from, oh, I totally failed, I screwed up, to say, why was it that important to me? Well, it's that important to me because I'm passionate about diversity and I really care about helping people. And so it sort of gives me a little bit more space and a little bit of bandwidth to reconnect with what's most important to me. So that's the technique of the divine flaw. And the book has a lot of techniques and tools on both sides, and I definitely encourage you to choose the techniques that work the best for you. So divine flaw, it may not resonate, or it may resonate, but what you can do, at least for me, divine flaws, I take that inner critic and I try to connect it. And so that's the next thing I want to talk about is really getting clear on what you're connecting it to. And stay with us, Jane. We're going to go back to you here in a minute. But I'm going to advance the slide to slide 11. And for me, this woman is on the beach, beautiful sunset, and she's doing a Pilates move called a star plank, which I have, after a year of working very hard in Pilates, learned how to do. Um, and what this slide represents to me, I don't know how many of you have ever taken Pilates or yoga or something that works on your core muscles, your torso muscles, right, to get those strong. And we do that. We now know that's important because our core muscles are the things that keep us from injury. They move our upper body and our lower body in a more healthy way. And so it's important to exercise your core muscles. Well, I have the same related belief in our own internal work. I think if you work your core, and I believe that core inside of us are know your core values, know the core feelings that you're going after in your life, the core identity that you want to hold on to and maintain, and the core energizing strength. And if you do the work, become self-aware of these, not only self-aware of those, but then make choices based on living in action on those things, you amplify your inner core strength. So one of the analogies I often make related back to core muscles to core integrity is what I call it, is I may not look like a very strong, fit, healthy person from the outside. I've got a little extra weight on me. Um, I need to do better in that. But I am actually very strong in my core muscles because of my work in Pilates. So if somebody comes and tries to sort of push me over, it's not going to work because I'm much stronger than I appear. The analogy is also true when we work on our core and we know what our values are, we know what identity we want to uphold. If somebody tries to push you over in a meeting and tries to, we've all been there in a meeting where somebody sort of tries to subtly attack us or undermine us. If you are very clear about your core values and core identity, your core strengths, they shouldn't be able to push you over very far. And if they push you over, well, you're pretty agile. You don't fall. You just do a nice little spin and you get back up. But what you have to do is the work to know what those values, feelings, identity, and strengths are. So I won't kid you, just like working your core muscles, you have to do your exercise. You have to do the discipline of figuring out what these things are. And one of the things that Jane and I have been working on is identifying those values, the identities, and the strengths that she has and that she wants to reconnect to. And inner critics come to say, when they come knocking on Jane's door and say, hey, Jane, we're here to party, Jane brings her own crew of success and strength type people to say, well, we've already got a nice party going on here. We don't need any more. We're at capacity. So Jane, we're going to work on those things with the group here too. And I do see a question from Bertita. When you're experiencing doubt, ask what you are connected to in that. I think, Bertita, you've got it exactly, which is, what is it that you're doubting? What is it that's meaningful underneath? Sometimes it's very surface. I had a client, her inner critic was about being lazy. She was saying she was lazy. And on the surface, that might have seemed important, but we actually worked our way down into what was really important to me. And when we looked closer, what we found is what was important to her is that she was the caretaker for her elderly parents. Is that her elderly parents felt like she was spending enough time with them, quality time, not quantity. Okay, so I want to work with Jane, with you guys on some of these core aspects. And I'm going to advance the slide. I put in a couple of exercises in the slide deck for folks to work on. But what I'm going to go to is, Jane, should we do the identity thing?
Sure.
It feels like that's the right thing to do.
Okay.
Okay, so I am on slide 14 right now. And I'll just explain the concept quickly. The core identity is, each of us have a lot of different personalities in us. I don't mean like multiple personality disorder. I mean, we all just have different aspects of our personality. And the question is, which aspect of our personality, which identity are we attached to and that we want to bring forward? Because some of those identities are old school. There's something attached to the past. And so I actually did some exercising when I rebranded my company, built a new website. And it was incredibly helpful because they asked me to what identities or what personalities were true about me in my work. And that's what I share on slide 14. It's sort of a collage of the identities that I'd come up with. And so for me, there are a couple of things. Some of you might see on slide 14 in the bottom left a picture of that's Beyonce. I think there's a part of me that's sort of a singer, a rocker, and I stand on stage and I proclaim about women's leadership and about the importance of emotional intelligence. And I want to do it sort of with style and maybe a little bit of bling, like Beyonce. Another part of me on the lower right-hand side with the Google glasses, and above that with the apple on their head, is a researcher, a scientist, a geek. I am geeky about emotional intelligence work. I get excited talking about human behavior. I love it when somebody sends me an interesting TED Talk. That's just part of who I am. It's an important identity to me. And then on the upper right, there's a woman with crazy colored hair. That's another part of me. I actually like to be different. Like, I don't really want to look like everybody else. I don't want to necessarily fit into the crowd. And it was important for me to become more aware of these things because instead of, often my inner critic wants me to fit into the crowd. And so I'm doing this battle inside. But now I realize that I am more comfortable taking an opposing view or looking a little different. I am comfortable if I am the only woman in an all-male team because I want to hold a contrary opinion. I want to help people see things differently. So it's enabled me to be more of my true self. And sometimes that's hard to do when you're at work or you're in a meeting or you're at a conference. You're surrounded by, I don't know, maybe all white guys, and you feel very different. Because I've done the work to realize that I actually want to feel different, my inner critic pipes up and says, oh gosh, nobody wants to listen to you because you're a woman, you're different. Then again, I shift that energy to positive and I say, yes, I am different. And that's important to me. I want to show them that I have tattoos. I don't know if people can see, but I have tattoos. I want to look different. I want to expose different things. And Jane and I went through this activity. And Jane, what I'm wondering is if you'd be willing to share a couple of the identities that you explored. And particularly, I think you mentioned to me one time, you decide who you're bringing to a meeting with you.
Yes.
Okay.
Can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
It looks like, okay, my camera's dead, I think, but if you guys can hear me, it's great. So the exercise in the book is about setting up a dinner event and who would you invite and what are the qualities and aspects, what are they, and the best part is Stacey said, well, what are they wearing? And that actually resonates for me because I think about all of these different aspects of things that I aspire to be. So for example, one of the people who I think about is Lincoln and his integrity and his honesty. Another person I think about is Sheryl Sandberg and her ability to be a strong woman and say, don't be afraid to try. So all of these different folks I thought about, and one of them was, and I'll share it with you, is my grandmother, who at the time of the communist revolution, she carried the family and escaped to Taiwan. And she is a very small, if you saw her, she was a very fragile, small woman, and she took over a room. And she made men cower, and she had things done. And I conjure her when I'm looking for strength. So when I go to different meetings, and before a meeting, one of the exercises that Stacey had me do to build up the muscle was to, before I go into a meeting, think about what I want from that meeting. And as part of thinking about what I want from a meeting, I also decide who I need for the meeting for the folks who I consider part of the different personas that I aspire to. So in a meeting where there's information that may not necessarily all be positive, I bring truth. And as part of bringing truth, I bring Lincoln. Other meetings where I know it's going to be a lot of senior level folks, and I have that tendency to say, sit in the chair in the back of the conference room. I go to those meetings and I bring my grandmother and I bring her full force and say, Grandma, I need you to drag me through this meeting and be with me and give me some confidence. And so that's how I use all of the different identities.
That is great. I love that. I also love the way Jane describes her grandmother. The key piece that I want folks to get is that in the identity, I picked identity labels like rocker and geek and different. Jane picked people who represented her. Lincoln, her grandmother, Sheryl Sandberg. And when we were talking about these people, one of the key questions that I asked Jane is, and what is true about you that is similar to those identities? And so usually when we pick an identity, if it's someone outside ourselves, it's because we share something with them. And so as someone who's worked with Jane for and known Jane for quite some time now, I can tell you that I can see the resonance between Abraham Lincoln and Jane in terms of integrity, speaking the truth, and having to hold a hard line on something that may not be popular. I've seen Jane do that. When Jane talks about her grandmother, who is this small, diminutive person, but full of power and vigor, interestingly, Jane is very much like that. She's certainly not diminutive. She's a small, lovely woman, but her energy is vibrant and it fills up a room. And so what's actually happening is Jane's calling forth the image of her grandmother, which her grandmother is with her too, absolutely. But Jane's actually calling forth aspects of her own identity to walk into the room. And so these can be really helpful for you to get clear on the successful version of you. And I just want to explain, when I say the word success, I don't mean perfect, I don't mean happy. I define success as being challenged and doing what I'm passionate at. And so, unfortunately, I guess I'm sort of a glutton for punishment. I love challenges. So when I'm in very difficult times and learning something new, that actually equals success to me. So don't misunderstand when I use the word success as to be that everything is bright, shiny, and happy. The reality is most of us learn the most and have proven the most about our own integrity and our own goodness in the most difficult times. So core identity is just another interesting way to get in touch with who you are, what's important to you, and how that's part of your success. And what's interesting, and on slide 15 in the slide deck are the same questions that I had in the book that I asked Jane, although in the PowerPoint I didn't say what they were wearing. Jane, there's another question that says, who's your identity and what are they wearing? Because I like clothes, but I didn't put that in the PowerPoint presentation. But these are questions that can help you find those identities for yourself and take them into combat and debate with those inner critic voices. So one question I want to ask Jane is, when the inner critic message of, I don't know if I'm having enough impact, I don't know if I'm the right person for this job, which of your identities do you think is most helpful to you in combating that inner critic message?
Sheryl Sandberg.
Okay, and why is that?
Because I think of, as a matter of fact, I was thinking about it this morning before today and thought, if not me, who? Then who? And I really needed her strength to say, lean in. Don't take yourself out of the equation too soon.
Hmm.
really take and evaluate what your situation is fairly. And I started to say, I think she had mentioned there must have been a reason why they put you in that job because you're in it. There must be something that you're doing that somebody else could not have done, or you frankly would not have been in that job. So I think about her and remind myself to turn it around and find those things that are evidence of that are contrary to what the critic inside me wants to tear apart.
Great. Fantastic. Okay. So one of the things I want to do is I do want to open it up to questions from folks that either on the critic side from the last presentation or the success side from this presentation, or frankly, anything you want to ask. It doesn't have to be related to what we did yesterday or what we've done today. I mean, my job and Jane volunteering to be here was really, we both are very excited to participate in empowering women. And so, Jane, if you don't mind taking any questions too, I think we'll both. And so you can either put them in the chat room, I can track that, or there's a question button underneath our video that you can type them into. But what questions do you have about the inner critics that you deal with, or getting clear about your own success? I'll just give it a little bit of time. Feel free to go ahead and keep putting in. I'm going to use the airtime, and I'll just be watching for questions. But one of the things I would love to give you guys, as a true coach, I'm going to give you homework. Jane's used to this. I give her homework every time we meet. But on slide 20 in the slide deck, the techniques we've talked about on the inner critic side and the inner success side, they're great techniques. They don't mean anything if you don't put them into action. So one of the suggestions that I have for you is to think forward into the next 2 weeks. What are 2 moments where your inner critics are more likely to show up? And then what are 2 tools and techniques, either that we've talked about or that you know about, where you're going to practice that inner critic taming or reducing, or that inner success elevating? What are 2 moments that you're going to practice? Or I call this 2 by 2 by 2. So 2 moments in the next 2 weeks where you're going to use 2 tools to practice. So, and Jane, I'm going to put you on the spot. I don't know if there's anything you're thinking about in the next 2 weeks or any tools that you're thinking about. I can also share mine.
The 2 things that I would like to focus on is there's someone in particular who and maybe some of you had this experience. They push your buttons. Don't know why, but whether it's in a meeting or email or interactions, it's always you feel that little stress in the back of your neck and you don't know why. So part of what I would love to work on in the next 2 weeks is, why does this person initiate my inner critic immediately? And what tactics can I use to turn that around and really find the truth of whether this person is really putting me in that position, or am I letting him put myself into that position? And that's what I'm working on.
Mm-hmm. Great. So very specifically, there's somebody who can trigger you, and then you're thinking about what's really underneath this and what am I actually going to believe?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. That's fantastic. I know for me, across the next 2 weeks, we have a couple of I do a women's program, year-long women's program with a colleague of mine. And we haven't gotten a lot of work lately. We've done this program for the last few years, and our clients, budget, the timing, all those things. And 2 different clients just came out and said, we'd like to do a pitch to do the women's program here. So it's really great. It's fantastic news. And of course, I have some inner critics going on. Like, I'm going to screw up. I'm going to not talk about the right value. I'm going to say the wrong thing in the meeting. I'm just worried that I'm going to say the wrong thing. And so that we've got a couple of, it all happened this week, of course, right? Everything happens at the same time, which I'm trying to remember is an opportunity to practice a lot. So the two tools that I'm going to use is one, again, divine flaw for me is a very useful thing, about remembering, why do I get so nervous about this? Why do I get afraid I'm going to say the wrong thing? For me, it's because these women's programs that I've done have been the most enjoyable work that I've done in my career. I love them. I love the people I've met. And yes, secondly, absolutely, it's income to me. It helps me pay my mortgage. It helps support my life. So I'm going to remember the divine flaw. And then I think the other tool, we didn't talk about this, it's in the book, is I'm going to remember the success stories. I'm going to remind myself that we've already run several women's programs. They've been highly successful. It didn't matter whether I said the wrong thing or not. People still made their own decision on the value about it. So that's something I'm going to do. Okay, I'm going to just read, give me a second here to read from the chat room. I've got some. Buchita said, the identification of doubt serving to point toward the inner integrity that is being activated is helpful. Towards the inner integrity that's being activated is helpful. Let me just read this. I was once told to give up doubt for Lent. Find a spiritual way of turning doubt into a very useful tool. I think, Buchita, at least if I understand what your question is doubt for using doubt to point towards your integrity or to point to things that you're struggling with. And I think I'd have to say I agree with you completely that this is what I mean by the divine flaw. In those places where we have doubt, I think do point to places that are important for you related to integrity. But also, I agree, I think if I understand you correctly, in pointing to ways to shift or reframe it to a positive viewpoint. And I often get the question of, well, are all inner critics bad? And I don't think they are. I think, in fact, Surabi, I made a comment in another area. I think inner critics have served, there's a point at which they become, I question to myself and I say, is the inner critic pointing out something that I really need to pay attention to? And then when is that moment when it actually turns into something that doesn't serve me anymore, becomes unhealthy? And actually, the tool that Jane and I used yesterday in the session is something I use to figure out that point at which it moves from helpful to harmful. And I think the key thing there is it's not helpful if inner critics or negative tones are just spinning around in my head and I'm not doing anything about it. And just, in that spin where it's like, oh, I'm just terrible. And, I get to the point where I'm like, well, I'm just going to lose my job and I'm going to be living under the bridge. That's not helpful. What I need to do is break it down into something actionable. Now, if, for example, next week, there are some things that I'm contributing to the conversation about these women's programs that aren't helping my clients make a decision, well, that's something I need to change. That is practical, it's tangible. I can get feedback on that. So I think that's a way to sort of differentiate between a useful inner critic message and the less useful aspects of the inner critic message. I'm sorry, I'm drawn to the chat room here because there's just some great stuff going on. Giving up doubt for Lent. Wow. That would be, well, frankly, that would be impossible for me to give up doubt for Lent because I like the spirit of that. I like the spirit of using your doubt and shifting to positivity. I absolutely endorse that. Using your doubt as an opportunity to find where your integrity is and to practice shifting that doubt to a more realistic, more practical, more positive approach. I know the reason I would not move towards saying I give doubt up for Lent is because doubt is a natural phenomenon. I cannot stop it. I have no control over I can't control my emotions. Um, that might sound very provocative because we love to be able to control our emotions. And we can't control our emotions. They just happen. What we can control and choose is how we respond to those emotions. So what I can fully endorse is saying, for Lent, when I experience a moment of doubt, I am going to choose to use that as an opportunity to look for something positive. That is a practical physiological, it's physiological impossible to stop doubt. I don't want to set you guys up for a thing you can't do, that you can make different choices. So I'm also reading Doubts and Strength to Believe I Can Manage My Own. You can absolutely manage your doubts. You cannot control them, but you can choose what you do next. Darabi is saying she's been lifting weights and finds that physical strength translating into feeling empowered. Well, I cannot agree with you more. And this is what I'll close on is I'm somebody who struggled with weight for the last 20 years and my weight going up and down. But I did Pilates for an entire year. I made myself commit to doing it for a year. And the internal strength that I was building did not translate into weight loss, which I think was something God was helping me do. But I felt so strong, and it actually totally changed my confidence too. So I couldn't agree with you more. So just in closing, I want to first say thank you again, Jane. Gosh, namaste, Jane. You are such a brave and courageous woman in being willing to talk about your doubts and your successes in front of us. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for participating. Feel free to share links to the session, watch it again, and send us feedback. And have a fantastic International Women's Day. Enjoy. Celebrate. Bye.
Thank you so much, Stacey, for such a great session. Really, really great. I know everyone here learned a lot and enjoyed it a great deal. Uh, You'll be able to view the recording in about 30 minutes. As soon as I shut this off, you can use that same URL that's up there above. The same link that you used to get into the session will also be the recording. So that will be available to you. I would like to encourage you to participate in the next session with Dhanashree Patki. It's entitled Think Green, Analyzing and Optimizing Power Consumption. That is a 30-minute talk. And then after that one, Jacqueline Jansen will be doing her workshop on negotiation, which I know will be extremely popular and something that we all can take advantage on this Saturday night or Sunday morning or whatever time it is for you. So I hope that you'll stay tuned and join us into the next session, and I look forward to seeing you with Dhanashree. Thanks, Stacey, so much. You're awesome, as usual.